to Captain's Log, episode number 10. My name is Chris, also known as Rachel Garrett, on starbaseutc.com and sdowiki.org. So, first of all, I wanted to point out, finally I got a mic, and I'll be recording this show separately, video and audio, and I'll sync them up at the end, and hopefully this will produce much improved audio quality for you guys. And I'll have to wait and see how this impacts the editing process, how much overhead this generates, but I'm pretty confident that I'll be able to continue doing separate audio and video recordings, and hopefully that will benefit the show in the long term. So, then another thing, you didn't get a direct YouTube link on the Star Trek Online forums. And this is because actually I think there's quite a bit of censorship going on there, especially regarding some topics I wanted to discuss in this show. And just because I didn't want to get deleted or my post to be deleted, well, you had to find your way to this podcast this week, and I hope everything will clear up at the end of the show, when I will go into detail on what I wanted to discuss and why I think it wouldn't be wise to discuss that on the forums. So, let's start with some Trek-related news. So, maybe you know John Eaves. John Eaves was a designer for Star Trek, both the motion picture films in the Next Generation era as well as the late Star Trek series. And he just moved, and while he was going through his things, he found some new sketches and some new artwork relating to the future of the Enterprise E after Nemesis. So in Nemesis, the Enterprise E is beaten up quite heavily when it crashes into the scimitar and it needs to be rebuilt. And actually during the production phase of Star Trek Nemesis, the production team didn't know that this was going to be the final voyage of the Next Generation crew, and they planned ahead for Star Trek 11, which was going to be a Next Generation movie. And, well, he made plans on how the rebuilt Enterprise would look like, and they wanted to apply the Aztec pattern, which is also very prominently featured on the Star Trek, on the Starship Enterprise NCC 1701D. And you can find links of that in the show notes. And more on John Eaves when we discuss Star Trek Online news, so stay tuned for that. But I want to commit the majority of the show to gaming tidbits. So last week I showed you a video from Emily Greer, who gave a talk on behalf of Congregate in order to recruit new developers to publish their free-to-play games through Congregate, basically. And she gave tips and tricks on how to monetize free-to-play games. And I promised that I would discuss this talk on this show and, well, discuss it with regard to, well, Star Trek Online and gaming in general. So, to sum up her talk, the first thing she says is that the top 5% of players roughly pay for 50% of revenue in a game, and these are basically whales. She's calling these players who are spending more than $100 or even more than $1,000 depending on the game. And she's presenting 4 theses. First is developers should make sure that the in-game store offers enough items at a high enough price so that players can spend $1,000 and more on the store. And second, developers shouldn't be squeamish about pricing these items. And quote-unquote squeamish. Western developers, in her opinion, are too squeamish when they are pricing their items. And she embraces a pricing policy, and she illustrates using Gucci bags, basically. So Gucci prices its merchandise like 10 times as what it's worth, so it's overpriced 10 times. So this allows vendors to give 50% discounts, which gives buyers the impression of, well, getting a bag for a steal, when in fact the bag is still 5 times overpriced. And well, she recommends that model for free-to-play item stores. Because, well, when you establish an item at a high price, then you give the false impression that a sale will make that item really affordable, and, well, give the false impression to players that they are getting their money's worth, when in fact they are not. So she's embracing that price model, and she's making references to Chinese games where individual items are on sale for $1,000 or so. Her third thesis is that developers should look at the end game first, because in her opinion that is where the socializing has to take place, and where people are geared toward situations and are put into situations where they are more likely to spend money. So for example, in PvP heavy games, people are likely to go to the item store in order to get a leg up or get even with other players. So as we've heard recently from Geoff Tuffley, from a game designer's point of view, they think that it should be able for free-to-play players to pay for power, and that this basically gives you a 10% increase of your stats. And well, in PvP heavy games, you actually need to do that in order to keep up with your competition, because 10% is a lot. And the other thing is that, well, guilds and fleets can also animate players, not only because of envy, but also because of generosity. Because there's a small percentage of players, these whales, which are willing to spend a lot of money in order to have fun in a game, which means even more than $1,000 US. And these players are likely to even pay for stuff in a virtual item store that they will give to their guildmates, to their fleet mates. So again, the social situation encourages people to spend more money on the item store, even if it's not for their own. And I think this aspect of her talk I don't have too much problems with, because, well, that's simple generosity. But well, modifying the gameplay, the PvP gameplay, and actually, well, getting rid of the game per se, but simply, well, giving away power, giving away success for real money, well, this actually constitutes, this is what reduces a game to a piece of software, in my opinion, and it stops being a game if you include game mechanics like that. Well, then she makes a fourth point, and I don't have any problem with that either. Developers should continue feeding their players. So, well, release new content, do some events, stay in touch with the community, and so on and so forth. Even doing these ridiculous sales where you give, well, 20% off an item that is overpriced by 10 times its value. So Emily Greer is from Congregate, and she's presenting this from the Congregate's point of view, but I think the company Congregate is very similar to Perfect World. Only difference is that Perfect World actually owns Cryptic, while with Congregate, developers are more loosely coupled to that. So Congregate is more like a distribution platform and not a parent company for most of the developers, I guess. So, but I think most of what she's describing can be applied to Star Trek Online and, well, Cryptic Studios in relation to Perfect World. So I think we have that Cryptic Studios is being presented at least suggestions or even mild pressure by a Perfect World to incorporate these points, to follow these guidelines in order to maximize monetization from Star Trek Online. And we have seen that there have been an increase of prices in C-Store. Also, there is a trend of, well, going away from account-wide unlock on the C-Store and, well, retreating to per character unlocks, so that you're enticed to buy an item over and over and over again for your different characters, which again is a money grab basically. And also from Emily Greer's talk we learned that elasticity ends at $5 as a low point. So if a developer prices an item below $5, this will not generate enough sales to keep up with the lost revenue from the individual items. So $5 seems to be a sweet spot at the low end of the price scheme in order to maximize revenue. You can price items more higher than $5, then, well, less people will buy it, but bottom line is your revenue stays the same basically. This goes hand in hand, I think, with the EV suit controversy. So we have these EV suits that are priced at $7. Subtract 20% for these items for a special sale, and, well, you end up roughly in the region of $5. And yeah, there I think you have a clear application of these principles that were outlined by Emily Greer in her talk. Well, I basically want to make 2 points. The first one is this hurts gaming in general, and second one is if you drive this to the extreme, then individual pieces of software will stop being games at all, just because, well, if you do pay for power or pay to win, then you break essential mechanics that are required for a game being a game, in my opinion at least. So I think this is the less controversial point. The more controversial point I want to make is, well, this hurts gaming in general, or gamers in general. Back in the good old days we were used to, well, paying $50 for a boxed game, and we would get the full experience in these games. With free-to-play games that use this monetization model that Emily Greer outlines, which there is pay for power and pay to win basically, in order to get into these games to have the full experience, you are required to pay a lot of money. And from what we learned from Emily Greer, basically you need to be one of the top 5% spenders in a game. These games rely on the top 5% of players. These are paying the bills basically. That's what the huge subscriber base for MMOs once did. Each player giving away $15 every month. This money must be raised from the top 5% of players basically. And this requires you to invest more heavily into the game that you previously have. And instead of playing 6 games in a year, you will only play 1 game in the future if you want to get the full experience as you have before. So this will lead to less diversity. This will also make it more difficult to switch games, or what you can do, of course, is be a lower tier player, a second-class citizen, and hop from free-to-play title to free-to-play title and always jump to the next game if the previous game frustrates you because you hit that wall where you reach endgame and where, well, you either spend money or you go away. And yeah, this actually, I think, hurts communities, and this is why it's so deeply flawed maybe in the long run, because we have either these huge spenders which are heavily invested into the game and, well, are simple consumers of the game, or we have these free-to-play hopping players which do not stay long enough with the game to well, root into the community, and so on and so forth. So with the consequences that the creative part of the community is lingering. So with Star Trek Online we have the benefit of, well, the old lifetime subscribers which stay with the game and which are, I think, at the heart and the core of the community, and well, I'm training away. So again, 5% of players of a large user base now have to make up for 100% of a smaller user base, where each one gave $15 or, well, for a boxed game, $50 in order to play it. And well, the implications, as I said, are that we will experience less games. It will be harder to get into a new game because you are so heavily invested into the other game. And so I don't think this is beneficial for gaming communities in the long run. Maybe I'm wrong, but actually I think this is hurting gaming in the long run. And of course, I think as a community we cannot accept that real game mechanics are changed and twisted and turned in order to give advantages to players who simply gain these advantages and gain success by paying for that, which, well, you know, is coined pay to win. But the problem I see with this business model is that as a community we don't have any options, or we don't have any tools to subvert that model, because it only hinges on a small percentage of the player base. So even if 95% of the forums rage against something, this does not hurt the game, this does not hurt the net profit of the game. Because, well, in order to move anything, to make a developer move into a direction, you need to address the top spenders in the game, which are called the whales, basically. Because these have all the attention of the developer and the publisher. And well, if you're already a whale, then you have invested a lot into the game. And then obviously you don't have a problem with pay to win, because you were always on the winning end of that struggle. You are a first class citizen, you're a first class player, and actually you're not too interested into, well, fair play, so to say. I would be interested in your thoughts, what we as a community can do to keep Star Trek Online in check, to keep this monetization model in check, to keep the game mechanics balanced. I want to end on a positive note here. So what I think is special about the Cryptic games is the Foundry. The Foundry does not fit with the Congregate monetization model, because the Foundry requires a large and happy user base, or otherwise there won't be any good content from the Foundry. So I think this is very special, and this is a positive angle from where to approach this problem. And I'm happy to hear your thoughts on that. Well, there are some bright news actually regarding the, well, good old-fashioned games. And I've told you last week about the Humble Bundle for Android number 3, and this got a lot more attractive last week, because 4 more games have been added to that bundle. World of Goo, Osmos, Edge, and Anomaly. And these are mostly really fun games. I haven't played Edge yet, but I know the other 3, and these are really well done games. Actually, Anomaly would be my current favorite. This is a game that turns the tower defense game mechanic around. So you control a small army, a queue of tanks that navigates through a city, and you cast several powers on your tanks and try to keep them alive and to decimate the turrets, and you plan your route through the level in order to reach a goal with at least 1 tank. And this is really fun, and you can get all these games for paying more than the average, which is roughly around $6.70 something else. So for $7 you can get 9 really good games for Windows, Mac, Linux and your Android phone. Again, on the not so bright side, EA has decided to rename Command & Conquer Generals 2, which was a game I was looking forward to Command & Conquer, plain Command & Conquer. But not enough, it is going to be a free-to-play game. And well, after talking about all that monetization strategy for free-to-play games and the fact that Command & Conquer will be a game that heavily depends on PvP, actually there won't be any single player when it gets released. This basically kills the game for me. No interest at all. Do you listen, EA? I have no interest at all. I'm a die-hard Command & Conquer fan. I played Tiberian Dawn with VGA graphics on MS-DOS, and I'm not going to buy, or well, I won't be trying this game even. Not as a free-to-play title. Forget it. But on the bright side, I don't need to, because there's something even better than Command & Conquer, and that is, well, Planetary Annihilation. And this was proposed by Uber Games on Kickstarter, which will be a spiritual successor to Total Annihilation and Supreme Commander. And if you don't know these games, in Total Annihilation and Supreme Commander you are not playing a real-time tactics game like StarCraft or Command & Conquer, but a real-time strategy game with hundreds of units, real armies marching against each other. Actually, in Supreme Commander you don't keep track of your actual total resource balance. You don't do that. You always balance your resource generation against your resource consumption. But your ultimate goal is to keep popping out tanks as fast as possible and, well, put them into battle. And especially Supreme Commander is totally hilarious. You should take a look at this game and check out some YouTube videos about that. But this Planetary Annihilation proposal goes even further. Not only do you have this gameplay mechanic of, well, pumping out massive armies and sending them into battle against each other, and well, that's all again about strategy, but you do that on a planetary scale and actually several planets at once, using asteroids as weapons to crash them into enemy bases. It's really great. It's awesome. I really like it. I'm a huge fan of Total Annihilation and especially Supreme Commander. I played it a lot, and I think this might be the first Kickstarter project that will be personally funding. I'm really excited about that. And well, with that, I don't need you, EA. I don't need a crappy free-to-play Command & Conquer. So let's continue with some Star Trek Online news. So you may have noticed that you don't get any more fleet marks for Investigate Officer reports as of the update from Thursday. And well, I'm a bit sad about that. I really hope that Investigate Officer reports would at least yield a small amount of fleet marks, more than your Officer of the Watch mission. But well, nothing. I told you last week I found I thought that the amount of fleet marks that was produced during the fleet week was ridiculous, but I think like 15 fleet marks would have been perfectly fine without upsetting the balance of the game. But well, Cryptic decided to, well, we don't give out any more fleet marks for Investigate Officer reports. Not even during the fleet event, which I don't get. Then there was a bit of upstir on the forums. It turns out that you can buy duty officers on your starbase. And as of this week's patch, you cannot use these officers anymore for your fleet projects. But you can sell them on the exchange. So actually there are now duty officers on the exchange that other players will buy in order to progress their fleet projects, when in fact they cannot use them to advance their fleet projects, and they will find out the hard way. And well, Cryptic's reaction to that was letting Jeremy go to the forums and, well, saying that they know that this is a problem. That's all from Cryptic on this front, sadly. And again, there was no word, no further comment that I could find, but please let me know in the comments if you know otherwise, on why the testing rewards from Season 6, why these are only one-time unlocks. So again, I want to caution you, if you got your Fleet Tribble or your Solian Dov, don't dismiss them, because you cannot reclaim them as you could with previous test rewards. And still we got no, at least I couldn't find any dev response to why these are only one-time unlocks. And yeah, I find this really annoying, to say the least. And then there would be some awesome news to talk about, but this is something that Cryptic and Perfect World don't want us to discuss. And this is a leak. Obviously, a Wells-class starship managed to sneak into one of the Klingon missions as an enemy, and I've got a video from Yusral on YouTube, and you find a link to that in the show notes, which shows you that ship. Also, in the Foundry, there are 2 new ships. A new ship called Korath, which seems to be a counterpart to the Wells class, a sort of futuristic Klingon ship, and also the Vesta, which, well, seems to be some kind of holy grail for a lot of people out there. A ship designed by Mark Rademacher for the Star Trek Destiny series of novels. And actually the model seems to be there. You can see some lights, but the hull isn't textured yet. But you can find a link on to YouTube, to Yusral's YouTube channel, where you can check out this ship in detail. But as I said previously, for some reason Cryptic and Perfect World are really nervous about this. They do not want to get the news out about these 3 new ships, and are, well, censoring everything on the forums that they can. Actually, any and all links to these new ships and images of these new ships are getting deleted, and Stormshade even posted on the forums, and you find a link there, that if people repeatedly post links to these game assets that are out there, that they might risk infraction. And this is basically the reason why they don't find a link to this video on the Star Trek Online forums. And, well, actually, what's with this censorship? This is the internet. People, please. Cryptic messed up. They wanted to surprise us. Okay, I get that. But, well, if you screw up, then don't try to cover it up. And, well, don't threaten players for discussing this new hot news item. But in order to end this show on a positive note, I want to get back to John Eaves. And I've seen that last week he published some concept sketches he did for Perpetual, for the Perpetual Star Trek Online, which are really awesome. And I want to give you a link in the show notes, and want you to check these out, because these really look awesome. Go over there and encourage him to post more of these, because I think the artwork he did for Perpetual Star Trek Online is really something that should see the light of day, in my opinion at least. So, I hope you enjoyed the audio quality of this week's episode. I see you out there. Good night and good luck.